Hello everyone, welcome to Module 5.1, where we will explore gender, privilege, and oppression. Here are a number of gender constructs listed. Sex refers to physical markers used to define male and female. Gender is a social construct used to refer to a learned behavior. Gender identity refers to one's perception of one's own identity as it relates to gender. And then we have several related terms. We have non-binary, genderqueer, and transgender are terms that refer to an individual not subscribing to conventional gender distinctions. The individual identifies with neither, both, or a combination of male and female genders. Transgender is an umbrella term when gender identity doesn't match their sex. In contrast, cisgender means that gender identity does match sex. Gender role refers to behaviors that indicate to others the degree to which one is female, male, or androgynous, with androgynous referring to having both male and female characteristics. Gender expression is conveyed through clothing, gestures, verbal communication. It can be expressed differently throughout the day depending on who one is interacting with. Genderism, also known as gender binaryism or Cissexism, is discrimination against non-binary people. The impact of gendered socialization on a trans person's identity construction is one of the major barriers of self-acceptance. We looked at white privilege, and I previously mentioned male privilege. Now let's look at examples of cisgender privilege. You should read all of the examples that are linked in the slides, and you have access to the PDF file of the slides. Here are a few of them that I listed. I can use public restrooms without fear of verbal abuse, physical intimidation, or arrest. So this is something that someone who's cisgender, someone whose sex matches their gender identity. So then it's easy to use a bathroom. Trans folks don't have that privilege, right? Cisgender folks also, strangers don't assume they can ask me what your genitals look like and how I have sex. Imagine being asked that. Some trans folks experience that. So it's a privilege to not be asked about that. I can reasonably assume that my ability to acquire a job, rent an apartment, or secure a loan will not be denied on the basis of my gender identity or expression. Again, another privilege. When you have cisgender privilege, you can walk around your day without even thinking about your gender. That is not the case when you don't experience privilege. In this course, we explored different isms. And as one of my students once wrote in a journal entry, the isms are systems that require hierarchies which create dehumanization across all levels. Remember what I mentioned in a prior video about racism and who can be racist? You need prejudice plus power. So who has societal power when it comes to gender? Well, men are considered the dominant group when it comes to gender, and so sexism is about prejudice, stereotyping, or discrimination against women on the basis of sex. And so men are the ones that can be sexist because they have societal power. We also have genderism, which is discrimination against non-binary folks. Now let's look at intersectionality. Cis heteropatriarchy, a long word, refers to a system of power where cisgender heterosexual men are privileged, while other genders, sexual identities, and gender expressions are marginalized and oppressed. Cisgender heterosexual men generally hold the highest positions of power in society. Misogyny refers to the oppression of women. Misogynoir is anti-Black racist misogyny that Black women experience. It can come from Black men, from white men and women, and even other Black women. In the video you watched on misogynoir, Crystal Fleming spoke about the intersectionality of race and gender that Black women experience. Misogynoir is different than what white women experience with misogyny because there are two forms of oppression that intersect in the experience of Black women, race and gender. So what about men and intersectionality? Depending on context, some identities might be privileged while others oppressed. We do have the relationship between gender and male privilege, but not all males experience the same level of privilege. A white European American heterosexual male has different experiences compared with a white European American gay male, who has different experiences compared with a Black Caribbean gay male. Therefore, it's important to consider how different identities intersect with each other and lead to either privilege, oppression, or a combination of both, depending on context. Using an intersectional approach to understand identity development allows one to understand the fluidity of identity depending on context. What this means is that identity doesn't have to be fixed. It can shift and evolve over time depending on experiences and social context. In one of your readings, Eklund describes the case of a 7-year-old child named Max whose parents immigrated from South Korea with traditional Korean and conservative Christian values. Max experiences intersectionality conflicts as he negotiates his Korean cultural identity, his American identity, his religious identity, and his gender variant identity. Max is unhappy about his genitals. He doesn't want to touch them, and going to the bathroom was a problem in school. Max experienced peer rejection both at school and in the community. He did not overtly express a desire to be a girl or to dress like a girl, but he has internalized the rejection he experiences regarding his feminine tendencies. Max's ethnic and religious identity were sources of anxiety and distress because they were in conflict with his gender variant understanding of himself. His parents socialized him according to their Korean culture and religion, and his brother's school and the media represented American culture. The family's Korean and Christian cultures are patriarchal, having clear gender role differentiation and center heterosexuality. This case helps us to see how this child in therapy comes to make sense of his identities using an intersectionality lens that helps us to understand the fluidity of identity depending on context. In Module 5.2, we will look deeper at sexual identity and heteronormativity.